Hi, and welcome back to the panel room. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and tonight we have gathered an esteemed crowd of people and me to come in and talk about the ideas of pop culture, fandom, and how we see and get to work with this in an academic environment. What happens when we take pop culture to school? So let's see who's coming in to take me to school before the night is out. So Chuck, you're up first.
Well, my name's Chuck Coletta. I'm a teaching professor at the Department of Popular Culture at Bowling Green State University. And we are the home of the Brown Popular Culture Library and the sort of the ground zero for academic study of popular culture. That's where I am.
Cool.
Kathy?
I'm Kathy Merlock Jackson. I'm a professor of media and communication at Virginia Wesleyan University in Virginia Beach. I actually am a graduate of Chuck's School of Bowling Green State University, where I got my PhD in American Culture Studies. And I primarily focus in courses in media studies and children's culture.
Hansi?
I'm a documentarian, and I have been documenting fans and transformative work, fanfic, cosplay for about 20 years, and showing it in classes and to libraries and talking about fan studies with people.
Marx?
Yeah, Marx Pyle. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, author, and more relevant to this, I have a master's fine arts degree in writing popular culture from Seton Hill University, and I'm also been a professor off and on, teaching in Kentucky Wesleyan College, and also workshops other places on script analysis and web series and filmmaking in general.
Is that Buffy? All of them on the top shelf behind you?
Yep. There's all Buffy and some Angel. Yep.
Yep, squirrel is kicked in. All right, we know where this is going to go. Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny Swartz-Levine. I'm the Dean of the School of Arts, Education, Humanities, and Social Sciences. I'm also a professor of English and director of the Writing Center at Lake Erie College, which is in Painesville, Ohio, about half an hour east of Cleveland. And at Lake Erie College, we have a popular culture minor. So I'm looking forward to talking about all things pop culture this evening.
So Chuck, I want to start with you on this one. From your idea, from your viewpoint, and obviously with the size of the program you guys have got, what do you find is really the importance of the idea of pop culture, of fandom, the study of it? From your perspective, what makes it important to actually study?
Well, I always go back to what Ray Brown, who really started the field of popular culture studies, and he defined it as the culture of everyday life. So it's not just mass media. It's local festivals, it's local things, it's things from the ground up, not just top down corporate. But his idea was we should be studying the things that people are doing in their free time that they want to do. It's not just the top 10 books on the bestseller list of the New York Times. It's romance novels, it's Tom Clancy, it's Stephen King, it's comic books, it's board games. So we have a wide net of what we consider popular culture. And because people are doing it, that it's worthy of study.
Kathy, what are your thoughts?
Actually, Ray Brown was one of my professors at Bowling Green, so I sort of got it from the horse's mouth about studying it.
Wow.
I certainly agree with everything that Chuck says. I guess another thing that Ray said is that popular culture is to people like water is to fish. It's all around us. We can't sort it out. And it's important to study it because we don't think about it. I remember he did an encyclopedia of popular culture, and one of his favorite entries in that encyclopedia was on wallpaper. That it's just there. We don't think about it, but how much are we affected by the wallpaper, in our lives? And what makes it worth studying is the fact that it's around us. We're affected by it, but we don't really think about it. So we do need to look at it critically. And by doing that, we can learn how to approach other things critically.
Hansi?
I'm just huge pop culture fan. I always have been. I mean, even, as a kid, I was reading Andy Warhol stuff and I wanted to be Andy Warhol. I mean, I'm just obsessed with pop culture. It's like, it's how I think in my brain. And I didn't really have an academic, education for it. I went to film school and it was in the 90s and it wasn't even an option where I went. And I'm really sorry it wasn't, because I would have just totally dove into it.
Marx?
Yeah, I think similar to what everyone else has said, I took writing classes before I went to film school or went to get the MFA in popular fiction. And there was a lot of focus on, it was all very popular culture, pop fiction, right? And it's not that wasn't relevant things to study, but it was very frustrating to me to want to explore my imagination and science fiction, fantasy and stuff. Someone who grew up, obviously stuff behind me is not, there's a Shakespeare back there somewhere. So it was frustrating to get my creativity stifled in that way. And so I think it's important to study it and accept it and have more schools that teach that.
Jenny?
Well, a lot of what the others have said, I agree with. One of the things we talk about in sort of our intro to pop culture class is about how it's important to study the stuff that we do for fun. Because, college is not just supposed to be about training you for a vocation, but it's also about studying our avocations as well. Because having a good sense of why we do the things we do for fun helps us understand ourselves better, helps us connect with others better. I usually talk about, so say you're an environmental science major and you're at a community meeting later on and you're trying to explain some sort of reason why you need to save this particular, species of fish or whatever. And you're trying to explain to the community why this is an important thing. Well, if you've got some cool examples that you can connect with them with that are popular culture related, Captain Planet and the Planeteers or, something like that, it helps you explain difficult concepts to others and help them understand why what you're doing is important. So it helps us connect in ways that just purely studying a subject matter doesn't.
I think the only two things that you can talk to anybody about are popular culture and the weather.
Yeah.
You can start a conversation with anybody, anywhere on those two subjects.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure pop culture will get you in trouble in some of the circles I run in.
Oh, yeah. But that's
I've had that happen,
fun.
yeah.
The weather could too, I guess.
I do live in the South. So let me throw kind of this question out there. And Kathy, I'm going to start with you on this one. And I kind of want to pick up on this theme. In my misspent youth, I did up to graduate level work in cultural anthropology with a lot of stuff around magics, religions, belief systems, right? And one of the things that I always found fascinating, we find things going back to antiquity. We find the scribbles of, everything from, A loves B to, this particular emperor is an idiot. And we find the use of pop culture. I mean, look at it definitively within Rome, how the emperors and how many things were reflected over time. If we go back through any civilization, often what we see is kind of the pop culture interpretation or the pundits' interpretation of the people, right? So looking at that, when you think about it from that point of view, how do you view pop culture itself for us in our culture? Does it serve the same purpose? Have we gotten beyond that? Or are we doing a better job with it now because we've got more avenues and more mediums to try to spread message and idea?
Yeah, I think popular culture is just a reflection of who we are. And that's what's so fascinating about studying it, is that things don't have identity tags on them. But if you look at popular culture, you can figure out what's important to somebody. You can figure out what's not important to somebody. You see what groups are marginalized. You see what groups are elevated. You see prejudices, and they're not always clear. They're not. You don't know the whys sometimes. But popular culture, it's almost like a mirror that enables us to look back at ourselves. So it's almost like studying popular culture. You're right. I mean, we're like modern day archaeologists looking at the artifacts of our time and trying to figure out what they mean.
Hansi, I can see over there nodding away. So,
well, I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been writing more. Need to spend more time at home these days, so not so much documentary. And I've been writing more, and I got my first published essay coming out in October in a book, so I'm very excited. But I've been like trying to work on this other essay, and it's very much about like pop culture and identity and celebrity. And I've been trying to parse it out and pull it apart. And there's so many ways you can, with pop culture, there's so many ins and so many ways you can look and turn. I think it's like endless. It's really fascinating.
Marx?
Yeah, I mean, it's a reflection of what people are thinking and enjoy at the time. And I think it's also a great way to, as a writer, to explore social commentary type issues with a little bit of, I think it's a more of a safe space for people to explore that, to where it's a little bit a step removed from reality. So where people might get defensive about something, like when you talk about politics or something to someone, I think it's a little bit step removed where maybe they don't really think about that or they're not get defensive. And then they maybe, or hopefully they ponder a little bit on some of the things reflect. I think Star Trek, for example, it's always had a great history of that. But a lot of popular fiction does do that at times. So I think that's a great strength in it. Probably why it resonates so well with people, long term.
Jenny?
I think that in a lot of ways we make a mistake, and I talk to my students about this all the time. Everything always has been popular culture, and we've elevated so much of it now. And I keep telling them that they need to stop thinking about certain things as like literature with a capital L, right? I mean, Shakespeare was popular culture. Charles Dickens was popular culture. And because of the distance of, time and space, we've all of a sudden ossified those and sort of elevate them in certain ways. And we've got to realize that this was stuff people were doing for entertainment and for fun. I mean, people were sitting around and reading Jane Austen after dinner. This was entertainment. When you have people waiting on the docks to find out what happened in the latest Charles Dickens novel, it was not high culture at that time. It was popular entertainment. So we need to stop trying to draw these lines of demarcation and understand that everything since time began, all the way back to, complaining about the emperors, it's all popular culture, and it's how we relate to each other. And that's the importance of why it's so important to study it, is because it's about human interaction and human experience.
Chuck?
No, I totally agree with that. And I use those same exact examples about Charles Dickens and Shakespeare. If Shakespeare were alive today, he'd have a Netflix deal.
Yes.
That's who he was writing for. He wasn't just writing for the Queen or the kings. It was for the scullery maids and the tavern people. And someone earlier said about popular culture being a mirror. And I always tell my students it's more of like a funhouse mirror. It reflects the culture, but it's not exact. For example, if you watch, or when I watched TV shows in the 70s as a little kid, early 80s, I thought every college dorm room was this enormous place, or these apartments on Friends. How do they afford this? It makes us think of maybe the best way I think about it is I teach a TV class every year, and you look at something like I Love Lucy, which not everybody knows anymore. Younger students don't know that, but it's been on for 70 years. And why study I Love Lucy? Well, you can look at Lucy in terms of feminism, in terms of an interracial marriage in the 1950s. The words, they couldn't say pregnant on I Love Lucy in 1953, 54. And 20 years later on Archie Bunker, they're saying, God damn it, at 9 o'clock on CBS. And you can say practically anything on TV today. So you look at these things as where they were as a signpost. The other quick example that I often give in my TV class is a few years ago when Mary Tyler Moore died, I saw it was announced on CNN or one of the cable news stations, and the two anchor women started to cry. That they were announcing, why would you cry about this famous actress who
parasocial relationships?
No, because they identified with her and they identified with that character, and she was the right person at the right time, and you never saw that before. And so these things mean something to people. The other last example I'll give real quick is I had a friend who cried when Han Solo got killed in whatever Star Wars movie that was.
Of course.
And he didn't cry when his own grandmother died, but Han Solo meant something to him. He named his son after Spider-Man. He named his son Parker because of Peter Parker. These things resonate in people's lives.
So
I wanted to add also about the technology, because I think I Love Lucy was also significant because of the technological advances. They were using the 3-camera system. They were the first ones to sort of do that. And so the medium is the message sort of thing. I think that's always really interesting to see the technology, how it meets up with what people are doing and how it persists.
So I want to kind of ride with this vein a little bit, but let's look at it from the other side. What are students thinking? What are the people that see the documentaries, that pick up the books, that read the essays? The people that see your films, Hansi. What's something that you've seen or heard, a piece of feedback, something that has come out from the students that maybe surprised them or surprised you? Some point of introspection, something that
there was a lot when I was showing. I did a short
lost you there for a
about
minute.
Women in fandom. Yeah, the audio's been bouncing in and out. You got me?
Yeah, now I've got you.
Okay. So I did a short film about identifying as a fangirl, and I took it to conventions and libraries and showed it to all these people, and everybody was coming up afterwards like, "Oh, that's me." And I remember when I first started shooting it, I had to explain to people what I was doing, what fandom was, what being a fangirl. Nobody had any idea of the words, fan fiction. And that was 2012, and now everybody knows fanfic, and I think most people know about these things now. No, just us cool people.
What about you, Marx? What's something that's come out in the conversations that surprised you, surprised students, surprised a fan, something that came out as, they got some massive realization?
I guess, one thing related to how technology changes and how we forget sometimes as we get older too is I had made a short film and was showing it at conventions and stuff many years ago, and it's like a dramedy type of story, and then had half of it was modern day, another half went in this woman's imagination when she goes into gets electrocuted, and it's in black and white and plays with a lot of imagery and aspects from silent film era, and I just remember this young girl is like, "Oh, I love that movie. It was great. I didn't quite get why it was silent during half the time, but it was great." And she had no idea what silent movies were.
Oh, that's terrible.
No, but it's an opportunity. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
Yeah,
Jenny.
but it's an opportunity for them to teach us as well, because that's kind of what, I've had that experience too. I had a whole bunch of them that, I walked in one day and I guess I'm their designated old person, because they've been asking their parents about things. And so I walked in one day and they're like, "Okay, what was this thing called a pager?" So we went through that, but then they started deciding that I needed to learn things. So I got to learn about a bunch of rappers that I haven't heard about before. They were queuing things up that they wanted me to listen to. I was given playlists. So it seems to me as though it's this wonderful opportunity for discussion, because yes, I get to explain the old person stuff, but they kind of are really relishing their role as getting to teach me too, and a lot of my colleagues. So they really dig it.
Yeah, when I teach
foreign exchange student,
Yeah, when I teach film, I always ask them, I do a survey almost, and I ask them what are some of their favorite films and TV shows and stuff. And I, as much as I can, I try to insert some of that or watch it if I haven't seen it before, and try to insert those examples, because I can tell the big difference. Whenever I'm mentioning something it's a classic and stuff, but maybe they haven't seen it or it's not really that relevant to them, or they haven't seen it since they're a kid. And but I can put that example spin on something that they care about. It suddenly like clicks with them and they get a lot more passionate.
Chuck?
It's exciting when somebody, picks something in your work, right? When they get excited about it, something you're fanish over. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So thoughts, Chuck?
Well, what I tend to do is I am turning into a cranky old guy, and when I teach a film studies class, I do choose older things because we were doing westerns, so we're all going to watch a John Wayne Western, Stagecoach, because they would not know who it was. And the one thing that I do see, and I'm biased here, but I do see that my students have a smaller frame of reference than I did when I was a kid. That they often don't know. They often don't know things, like black and white or older than they were. I had a student who really depressed me a couple of years back when she said, "Oh, I love to read old books. That's what I would like to do. I like to read old books." Like what? And she said, "Oh, like Harry Potter." I said, "Harry Potter." But I have to sort of like Jenny said and the others have said, you have to sort of meet them where they are. They know a lot of things that I don't know. But my opportunity is here. You see this thing that you like, it has precedence before it. There were references to it, and there were nothing is just blown out starting in 2024 or whenever it might be. So I try to do what everybody's saying, but it's becoming difficult as I got really depressed when I started teaching. I was about 10 years older than all the students. And then about 2 years ago, someone mentioned that I was older than their parents. Oh my God, goodness. So I better sit down.
That's when we became the designated old people, Chuck.
That's right.
When you start teaching the children of your former students, you realize
in my day, there was this thing called the Battle of the Network Stars.
Yes.
Grizzly Adams.
But are any of you guys on TikTok?
No.
But
I'm finding some really interesting music that I would never have heard if I wasn't on TikTok.
Yes, yeah.
I'll hear this song. It's something I never heard of, but
yes, they inundated me with TikToks one day. So
the TikTok.
If I could just pick up on something that Chuck said, I think that some of us who teach film and other media courses and popular culture courses tend to approach them from an historical perspective, and you sort of start at the beginning and silent films and the talkies and going that way. And I don't think our students think in that linear way at all. I mean, it's all very thematic, and it's just a very different way of approaching content. And for me, the historical perspective just makes sense. And for them, they are not very open to things that are not, it's almost easier to get them if you approach it in a thematic way as opposed to in an historical or linear way. Why
do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I have students who say, I'm not going to take that class if there's silent films and black and white film. I mean, I only
I've seen that before too.
And then sometimes though, you can convert them. They take a course. I taught a course one time in movies of the 40s, and it was right after my father had died, and I was kind of in that mode, kind of reliving a lot of things from my parents' lives. And my students were just struck by the strong narratives and came out of that course with an appreciation of something that they wouldn't have otherwise. But it takes almost a special student to have an open mind to go into these kinds of things willingly. They're also getting more and more impatient with long form.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy for me that they can binge watch 5 seasons of something, but yet they can't sit through a 30-minute film. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that. But they more want just short snippets of things as opposed to something longer that gives you the context for a particular scene or particular line, or just the way that I sort of enjoy teaching.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I also think that all of that's true, and I think that a lot of it is because with TikTok and Twitter and all of that, I mean, I think all of our attention spans have shortened because there's so much more input. I mean, when Chuck and I were little, Battle of the Network Stars, yes, that's true. There were 3 options, and
That's
those
right.
nights it was every network was showing the Battle of the Network Stars because it was a cross, promotional. But I also think that in a lot of ways, I struggle.
When TV went off for the night.
Yes, exactly. Yes, with sort of the Star Spangled Banner, and that was it. But but I also, we don't want to sort of turn it into kids these days things, and so it's thematic, but I found that starting with what they know and then working backwards, so it's the reverse historical timeline, because they're like, oh, so this is based on that, which is based on that, and they work their way backwards into finding that maybe those movies from the 40s and the, and sort of the silent films, that, hey, those are really cool because they trace the narrative through line, but in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys finding, and Marx, I'm going to hit you up with this one first, so you get the advance warning. Are you finding a difference in how pop culture is viewed depending on the medium? Books versus film versus comics. I mean, we're coming up on, 100 years of comics, 150 years of really pulp, these sorts of things. And I was talking to somebody, I was teaching a workshop not too long ago, and talking to somebody about the fact that, pulp was 100, it was really coming up on 150 years old, a little older, depending on what you can consider the first pulp. And that realization that both that it felt so old that it had been going around that long, but at the same time, there was that realization of it hadn't been around that long in that form either. So are you seeing how students, how viewers, how watchers, how people talk about it, look at it differently by medium and even by age and demographic? Not just the kids, not just the high school students or college students, but even when you're dealing with adults as well.
Yeah, I think so. Like in film, I feel it's taught, it's more accepted, sci-fi fantasy is, because they're big money makers, right? It's more when you get pushback from teaching because of the budget constraints and stuff. So you try to urge your students to watch their budgets because they're not going to be able to, come out with a script that's, $200 million film or something. That's not going to happen.
And what do you have available?
Yeah.
The story around what you have. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So but it's not as much about genre particularly. And I think the students, love that, that they have that freedom usually. At least it's the film schools I've been to, at least. I feel like where the big divide happens sometimes is with books. I feel like some universities are super, super down on sci-fi fantasy type genres. And I don't think it's really students so much. I just feel like it's those academic programs that they look down upon it and see it as lesser. And so I appreciate those universities that do teach that, and they're too rare. And I think that's what students want. And I think it's for commercial, if you want to make money at it in general, I think it's very beneficial to the student too. But I think what it is just try to bridge that gap and show that just because somebody's in a cape flying around doesn't mean it can't be a higher art form and tell a good story, right? So
look at the boys. Jeez,
Oh yeah. The Boys has tons of commentary about corporate America and celebrity worship and everything else. I mean,
so much meta,
right? And then
fuck.
So there's great stuff there that they're covering that is very relevant to our society, and even makes fun of their own corporate owners sometimes. So sometimes they take a little stab at Amazon or somebody else.
Oh yeah, well, hell. Somebody.
But yeah, I don't know about comic books. I don't know how. I haven't been to any university that's ever taught comic books. Unfortunately, I love comic books, but I unfortunately don't have experience with that. But I feel like the big divide to me in experience in university settings is definitely in fiction for sure. And I hope that changes over time. And luckily, we have great programs out there.
Well, that's how the popular culture department really started. Ray Brown was a English professor, and he wanted to supposedly teach Mickey Spillane crime novels in his class back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Mhm.
And the head of the English department said, no, that is not literature. That is, people are not coming to college and paying money to read Mickey Spillane. And somehow he was able to convince them, but it
How
is
wrong
literature.
they were.
But it is literature. And, I have a master's degree and bachelor's degree in English lit and American lit. I love all that stuff. And just like Jenny said, Shakespeare was popular culture of its day. And that's not to say people shouldn't read it, but Superman is an American icon too. And this character has represented something here and around the world for 80 plus years now. And you can go anywhere in the world and someone recognizes that Bat or Wonder Woman or Spider-Man's emblem. And those characters resonate. And sometimes characters sort of fall by the wayside. I had in my comic book class this past semester, Superheroes and Culture, I started with reading Popeye. And most of the students really were unfamiliar with Popeye. But we sort of talked about, look at how this began as sort of a precedent 10 years before Superman. It's all about the context, like people have been saying before. Trying to find people where they are now and see where this came from and where it's going.
Specific media seem to be changing, that everything just is merging now, that I don't know that our students or anybody really, is it a film, is it television, is it streamed, is it in a theater, is it a comic, is it a graphic novel, that it's hard to talk about specific media and the way that we used to be able to do that, because that whole world is changing.
I hate the fact that everything is content now. They call everything content.
Yeah.
But that's maybe I'm cranky.
Yeah. It's cringe, right? Yeah. No, it demeans it somehow. It just makes it sound like we're just churning out crap, which is not what we're doing. We're actually like critically thinking about something and exploring it.
So what about the view of so much of pop culture? I mean, if we talk about Andy Warhol, so much of what Andy Warhol did was commentary on pop culture via commentary on society, right? When we look at so many of these different things, when you're working with students, how often do they understand whether it is historical content, political content, religious content? I mean, one of the things I sat through a workshop in probably 20 years ago was a comparative religions course using Superman as that figure.
Sure.
And I mean,
I could see it, yeah.
It was, so how often do you get students that all of a sudden discover, oh wait, there's a deeper message behind just the fact that Wolverine is bashing on Sabretooth or whatever the case may be? So Jenny, what thoughts do you have on that?
I think it depends on the class. I mean, they start for our pop culture minors, the intro to pop culture class you have to have for the minor, obviously, but it also is part of our gen ed, which we call our core. So everybody that takes that class does not necessarily move on to the pop culture minor, but a chunk of them do. And in the intro class, it's really interesting because some of them really start to get it. But then as for those that are kind of moving in through and up through some of the other upper division classes that have picked up the minor, they really begin to make connections among and between things. I got an interesting paper this semester. It was for my composition theory course, which is not part of the pop culture minor, but the young man who is taking that class also is a pop culture minor. He's an English major too. And he wrote this paper about his plans for, I have them talk about what they're going to be when they would, things they might encounter as they become a writing assistant. And he compared challenges that he thinks that he's going to run into when he starts as a writing assistant to like this video game that I can't remember what it's called, but it's something involving fighting horses. I can't remember what the name of the video game is. Fighting mares or something, I don't know. But it was a really fascinating paper because he was taking sort of the study of composition theory and mashing it up with a video game and sort of like leveling up and all of those other kinds of things. So we get that kind of thing. And we do also get them start to realize that there's a lot more going on in like the comic books and things, that it's not just, sort of fistfights among superheroes, that there's bigger, deeper issues going on. And it's fascinating to me to see them think through things and begin to grasp bigger picture kinds of stuff the further on they move through the minor.
What about you, Chuck?
I agree with it. What was the question again? Remind me. I agreed with I was following what Jenny was saying, and I'm nodding along, and I sort of lost my place.
Well, what's it like to see students, consumers, fans really get that? Often, the allegory of pop culture, the message it carries, how that works.
What I try to focus on in a lot of my courses is to get them to think, a lot of people have spent a lot of time and money and energy to get you to read that comic book, get you to watch that show. And one of the things that's beneficial to my students who are at BGSU is we have the pop culture library there. So someone mentioned pulp magazines a few moments ago. And so what we did is everybody in my cultural pluralism class, which is all about multiculturalism and assimilation and ethnicity, we're all going to read one dime novel. Everybody had their pick. And they're not too long. They're 20, 30 pages, and just analyze the story. And they were shocked at, all the racial things and all the references to, if you weren't, a straight white guy, you were an other. So everybody speaks with a dialect. And I wanted them to see, look, this is what people were reading 150 years ago. And you can read it too. And you can have a different perspective on it. And so that's what I'm always trying to do, trying to get them to read and look at these things firsthand. It's one thing for me to tell you about I Love Lucy or an old TV show. And it's another thing to have them experience it. The one thing I always love in my television history course is we spend a day talking about Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. And I always show that famous episode with Burgess Meredith, and he only wants to do is read. And at the end, he breaks the glasses. Someone will always someone will gasp when the glasses break. And it still works. The thing is 60 plus years old and it still works. So yes, something might be in black and white, and yes, it might be older than you were familiar with, but it can still touch you. These things still resonate with people. If that was an answer to a question I'm wondering about. That's what I do. I'm sort of going, where am I?
We're all kind of hitting that point. Kathy, how about you?
I guess what I'm thinking about is that students do find things and they are amazed by the messages that they encounter, but you sometimes have to direct them a little bit. I know I've taught a romantic comedy course, and I give each student in the class a lens. Like as we're watching you're going to look at women, and you're going to look at men, and you're going to look at age, and you're going to look at setting, and when it's on your radar to look at something through that lens, you're going to see things that you might not see otherwise. And they're sometimes surprised at the things that they see in texts that they've seen a million times, but they didn't really look at it in that way. This past semester, I taught a course on childhood friendship in media. And one of the movies that I showed was E.T. as sort of the alien friend and kind of loneliness or whatever. And just that E.T. is Christ figure at the end, that, we went through all of the markers of that. It was like, wow, I never saw that before, that really is true. And then, we pull out an article, an interview with Melissa Matheson, who wrote the screenplay. And it was like, well, that was designed that way. And they look at something in a different way. Also in that class, in friendship, we look at Aristotle and friends of utility and friends of pleasure and true friends. And it's a message that they can appreciate, that they can see things in mass media that relates to their own lives and that they find meaningful. So yeah, if you give them the tools, if you give them the lenses and say, just keep this on your radar. It doesn't have to be a French theory by, Foucault, but just look at this one thing and see what you can find. That sometimes that can be really revelatory for them.
Hansi?
Oh, well, I was just thinking, I mean, I read Joseph Campbell, and I was always really interested in archetypes and archetypes in astrology and all sorts of things. And I think in fandom, I tend to look at stuff the same way too. You know, it's these archetypes, the hero's journey, all that stuff. So I think everyone kind of gets that. It's just how you're gonna package it for them, because everyone sort of understands the hero's journey, I think, right?
And once you read Campbell, it's like you can't look at anything the same way again. It's always there in your mind, and there are certain texts or certain theories that have that that quality.
I working on a project. It's actually a technology project, but we were going through today, and I was trying to explain something, and I finally pulled out Save the Cat and Story Beats, trying to explain how something could work. And all of a sudden there was this realization, because he was like, I don't understand. And I said, all right, well, think about it in these terms. And I walked him through Save the Story Beats with Star Wars. Then I went and did the exact same thing with a couple of other stories. All of a sudden it was like you get that realization that, wait, you mean I'm watching the same thing over and over again? Yes, which means it's systemic and repeatable, and we can do this with that. And all of a sudden it was that, I'm never going to watch anything the same again. I said, beware talking with writers. So, Marx, how about you? Any other thoughts in terms of?
Yeah, it's great when they can make that connection and you can help them. I think universities especially are excellent for that. I think if you can find a passion that they have outside of writing or film that they love, and then link that to certain works, that can really ignite a lot of excitement and creativity out of them. Like if there's study psychology and you can, explore some of that with psychology, it can make it can really click with them. But also you can help them find new passions. I love parallel universe type stories and stuff. But sometimes to truly appreciate them, you kind of need to know what historical elements were changed and what history was like before, and then that spurred more interest in history than I would normally have, and so it's a great way sometimes to get students to appreciate. It's like, these core classes are useful, see, and stuff, and help them grow, and both as a creator and just as a human in general. So
I think the one thing to keep in mind too, the jump between being a fan and being a scholar, is that I think in many ways fans focus on the details and the narrative, and scholars focus on the ideas. And the fans will always know the specifics of every.
Oh, I locked up Kathy.
That was interesting, though.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we'll get her back here in a second. Hey, Kathy, we lost you there for about a minute.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I'm sorry.
And it was all sounding really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says I've got an unstable connection, but I guess it's back. So, yeah, my point was just that fans focus on the details, scholars focus on the ideas.
So, and Hansi, I know you've got a hop for another one. Do you want to give everybody, tell everybody where they can find you? And then we've got about one more round I want to hit through with everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Hansi Oppenheimer. My company is Squee Projects, and Squee Projects on Twitter and Facebook and all those places, Instagram, TikTok. I always post my TikToks, and they're really fun transmedia. I look forward to talking to you guys again, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Hansi. We'll see you soon. So I want to throw an idea to
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Hansi. I want to throw up an idea to the panel at large. And I think this is one of those things where I think there's great value to me in these kinds of programs. I build a lot of teams. I work with people in a lot of different areas, different specialties, stuff like this. But I've long found that people that have not only whatever their business specialty, their technology specialty, whatever that case may be, if they actually have that creative output, that creative outlet, that real true passion and desire for something outside of it, even if they're not, like I'm a writer, I do glass, I do a lot of different things. But for people I work with that have a creative bent and creative passions and interests outside of whatever they do, they think differently. They look at things differently. They're often much more complex in terms of how they approach and maybe will work with things from different angles. When you guys look at students, when you look at the people that are going through these programs, are you finding some of the same sorts of things, same sorts of ideas? What are you getting in terms of benefit, maybe outside of these programs, from people that have these interests and passions? All right, we played Stump the Panelists.
Yeah, one side interest of mine, or I mean, it's connected, but it's about the science of creativity, right? Because I have a degree in psychology in addition to writing. So I'm always curious about where ideas come from and everything. And I think it's really interesting. Like, I feel like there is in general, I think it's less than it used to be, but I know when I grew up, there was a feeling that, like, you should do something practical with your life. Don't quit playing. That's for children and stuff. And and I think, creativity is super important. It's super important for scientists, super important for all the fields if you're going to be innovative. And I do feel that America, one of our milestones or strengths in our culture is trying to be innovative, always trying to push and do new things. Or at least that's what we feel that we do in many fields. And so I feel it's ironic that we do stifle that sometimes. There's a research, I don't have numbers in front of me, so I don't even try to say it, but and there's other research too that goes more complicated about it, but where they took a study on creativity with NASA scientists, and then they applied that to children, and like 5 years old, I think, and then they did a few different stages of their lives, and these young children in this test were pretty much geniuses when it came to creativity, but you could tell as it went, they just dropped to like somewhere in a single percentage range, and that's sad, to see that. And so I do feel that people who do explore their creativity, who do exercise that muscle, I think it does help them, even if they're not going to be a writer. I think it helps them in all other fields, and plus and with writing especially, I do feel that it can create a sense of empathy, because you have to put yourself and share other points of views of characters to the reader. So I do feel that's super important to help people think about other people, that aren't like them. And I think that alone, that can help stop all sorts of problems in our society and the world. So anyway, I don't know if that answered it.
Well, I mean, that's really fundamentally what it means to be a liberally educated human being, right? I mean, that's the value of the humanities and liberal arts, and studying popular cultures is part of that, is that we learn empathy, and we learn the way that other people have approached problems, and we get the opportunity to exercise different parts of our brain, and we get a chance to, and I'm sure we all tell our students, sometimes you stare at something so long, you got to take a break and go for a walk, or go do whatever your avocation is. Go do your hobby for a while, because it's going to let you come back to this other project fresh, because we become better at everything when we're exploring all of these different activities. So if you're into glass, you're better at glass because of the other things that you do. You're better at your primary job because of the glass work. And everything's connected, because that's liberal arts.
Right. And I would just jump on with that. The last thing that Ray Brown talked about at his last public speech about a year before he died, about 10 years ago or so now, is that he thought that the future of popular culture studies was popular culture and. So the big problem when we try to recruit students or come be a major, the first question is from their parents: what job is he going to get with the popular culture degree? Well, I don't know. What job are you going to get with the history degree, other than a history teacher or an English degree? But what he thought it would be, and I'm seeing this starting to bubble up now with my students, is microbiology and popular culture, science and popular culture. Whatever they're environmental science or whatever it is. How do you explain this to people? How do you talk about this? How do you relate to them? And like was said earlier, people relate through popular culture. I might make a reference to some Shakespeare or sonnet. Most people won't know it. But if I talk about Superman and Batman or whatever it is, not that we're dumbing things down, but trying to find the way into that field. I know a guy online who's a medical doctor, and he uses comics a lot in his speeches and his public presentations. And well, you think that doesn't apply at all, but it really does, and that's where I see it going, popular culture and.
Yeah, I would agree entirely. Kathy?
I guess the only thing I can add to that is just the importance of collaboration for teaching. That the course I was mentioning, the childhood friendship course, I'm teaching that as a media professor with a religious studies professor and a philosopher. And as we approach a text from different angles and just pick out as important different. I mean, I'm looking at the women in these, or the absence of women in some of these movies and TV shows, and they're looking at virtue or philosophical messages that students respond to that, and certainly putting them in groups makes them more creative because they're bouncing ideas off of students in other majors. And I think popular culture should be required for every student at every university as an entree into thinking and critical thinking and research.
So I'm going to throw the most complicated question of the night out there for everybody, just to see that look. No matter what we do in a panel like this, we could spend hours and never cover everything. But we always have that one thing in our back of our minds. Oh, I should have said that. Or there was one idea, one topic, something that, everybody has that thing they want to discuss. So this is that chance to go and say, okay, yeah, this is the idea, the numbers, the statistics, the one something I wanted to make sure we mentioned during the evening. So this is that time now. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be my first victim? Participant.
I guess I would just say that popular culture studies is open to everyone. And there's no subject that's too big or too small. If you come to the pop culture library, we have 25,000 plus romance novels. And we also have collections of matchbook covers and baseball cards and board games. And whatever you're interested in, somebody else is interested in it too. And it's worthy of study. It's Superman and characters from I Love Lucy or characters from TV shows today, or something that might be so insignificant seemingly. You're not alone, and there are other people who want to talk about it and want to research it, and that's a liberal education too. Just finding a subject and diving into it. If that's an answer, I don't know.
Well, it's your question, so you can make up any answer you want.
Okay.
Kathy?
I guess what I would say is that the one thing that I took away from studying popular culture at Bowling Green was, and Chuck, I don't know if that term is still used around, but what is the Bowling Green method? And in a nutshell, it's that you don't start with theory, you start with the thing, you start with the artifact, that every artifact is important and worthy in itself. For several years, I edited the Journal of American Culture, and I just remember getting these papers on films or television or whatever, and they would be going on for like 7, 8, 9 pages before they got to the thing, because they're laying out all this theory. And it takes away from the importance of that TV show or that movie or that thing. And I think that's really important. As you said, everything has value. Every matchbook cover, every piece of wallpaper, and you need to make that thing dominant and then figure out the ways to look at it, as opposed to trying to make it to make it more scholarly by attaching some fancy theory to it. The thing in itself is important.
Right. And I would just jump on that. I think that's exactly right. Spot on. And what I like about popular culture studies is you can come into it from any background. Like my background is English, but we have people who are not whatever the liberal arts are. We have people who've taught math, people who have done social science. There's no way that you can't get into popular culture. My English background would be solely. I sort of analyze Seinfeld or the Beverly Hillbillies like I would analyze a Shakespeare play. I'm from an English background, but that's not the only way to do it. So there's lots. I'm 100% with you on that Bowling Green method, which we're trying to really push again.
Right. And also and part of that is just putting things in context. You have the maker,
Right.
the artifact, and the audience, and they're all important.
Right.
Mark? Oh, Jenny, go ahead.
No, the answer to that question will occur to me at 3 a.m. because that's the way this always goes.
Right.
But I kind of share exactly what Kathy and Chuck are saying, is that studying pop culture, it's democratic, and it's interdisciplinary, and it makes it so that it is an on-ramp for everybody, because again, it's the study of us is really fundamentally what it is. And by doing that, we're throwing open the doors to everyone to come and join the party.
All right, Marx, it's up to you.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to go to college, do your research and find something that appeals to you, even if you major or minor in popular culture or fiction. There are universities that do that. So, like whenever I went my first degree, I went to in Indiana, and I didn't know about the Bowling Green up there. I would have totally went up there. So, but like MFA programs, there's only like 3 or 4, I think, to my knowledge, that exist in the U.S. that deal with popular fiction. So they do exist, but you have to hunt around a little bit. So don't think you have to go with the rest of the crowd of whatever in English or whatever your degree is. You can hunt around and find something else. And then if your parents complain, you can just say, I'm going to double major.
Well, guys, this has been a fun conversation tonight. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you, your programs, websites, anything like that you want to mention. So, Chuck, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Well, I'm at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and I'm only on Twitter, Dr. Pop Culture at BGSU. And I'll just mention real quickly while I have the chance, we have 2 conferences coming up that might be of interest. In this coming September 29th and 30th, we're going to be having a Spider-Man in Popular Culture conference. All aspects of Spider-Man we're going to be discussing. It's free and open to everyone. You can just find me on Twitter and submit a proposal if you're interested. And it hasn't been announced yet, but it's sort of what we were just talking about. The fall of 2024, it's going to be the 50th anniversary, I believe, of the Popular Culture Department. And so we are going to be having what we're calling at the moment a Ray Brown conference of where popular culture studies started, where it is now, and where it's going in the future. So that will be announced officially later this year. But it's going to be free and open to academics and non-academics, just sort of talking about exactly what we've been doing this last hour. So thanks for the opportunity for being with you guys.
Kathy?
I just published a book on I don't know if you can see this, on Jaws, essays on Jaws, and just want to give a shout out to that. And we're following that up. My co-editor and I are following that up with one on Rocky. So if anybody knows of anybody doing essays on any aspect of the Rocky franchise, we're looking for essays for that. I'm also working on one book is coming out on Forgotten Disney. That'll be out in the fall, and looking at stories and narratives. So those are some of the projects that I'm working on. And I'm at Virginia Wesleyan University, and easily findable there. So thanks. This has been fun.
Marx?
You can find me at marxpyle.com, and also some of the anthologies I publish at cabotcrossing.com. So like it might be interest to some people of this. I use some of my academic training, like the The newest one, Tales of Monstrosities, is the bookmark because I don't have the book on me right now. It's right behind me. I apply some of that with these projects because I have them in these books. I have them write essays in the back about kind of the behind the scenes of the thought process and the stories they created. And then also, not as visible to the readers, but to the authors it's optional, but most of the authors take me up on it. We do like critique group rounds, kind of how I did in grad school. And a lot of them who didn't go through grad school really love that experience. So it's a lot of fun.
Jenny?
All right. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jennifer Swartz 2. And also Lake Erie College, lec.edu. I'm pretty easily findable there. And I've been on a number of podcasts here on this particular podcast channel. I've also been on a number of podcasts over in the Firewater and Podcast Network, the Bwahaha Justice League podcast, and also on For All Mankind. And I also have to say, if anybody gets a chance to go see the Bowling Green Pop Culture Library, it is an experience that everyone should have. It is terrific. And so like check and make him take you on a tour. So.
Oh yeah.
There's also
free.
Yeah, there's also the institute there every summer where scholars can work in the collection.
Yeah,
nice.
Right. That's coming up again in the next month, but they will be doing it again. So that's a great place. It's open to all.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course, your ConTinual. And my latest book, or my latest piece, is in Fairy Films, We Folk on the Big Screen, which is a bunch of essays about how different films use fairy folklore to tell a story. And we'll see everybody again soon. Thanks, everybody.